There's been a lot of talk about why Silicon Valley Bank and the other recent U.S. bank failures went down the tubes, from not having a chief risk officer to making bad bets on long bonds, even just bad luck. But there's one reason I don't hear talked about enough that Silicon Valley Bank failed. And it may be something that you're doing in your own life, in your own business as well. I'm going to talk about how to avoid that. And you could say that it was bad luck, or just bad policies finally coming to roost, that Silicon Valley Bank was largely taken down by venture capitalists telling their companies, get your money out of this bank, creating a bank run. Peter Thiel, for example, told his startups, don't keep your money in this bank. And that speaks to the sort of real reason that I think Silicon Valley Bank failed. And it speaks to a lot of other things that we all do in our personal and business lives that we should avoid, and that's there's a herd mentality in the startup industry. There's a herd mentality in a lot of industries that we see in that, working with clients, there's always new industries that come in and we're happy to serve them, but you see people kind of have a certain mentality in different industries. We've seen, for example, venture-backed startups that have a hard time going offshore because not only can't they convince their partners to let them go offshore, but they can't convince their partners to let them use any other structure than some kind of Delaware C Corp that everybody owns. And that kind of restricts them on reducing their taxes. And so the herd mentality is something that when the word went out, hey, this bank is not going in the right direction, people all took their money out. We've received emails from a lot of banks that we deal with saying, we're not like Silicon Valley Bank because we're not niche. Now, certainly everyone's trying to put themselves on the record for why they're different and why you shouldn't remove your funds from their bank. But it is interesting that the United States is somewhat unique in having this level of niche banking where you get a bank that only caters to this sector. Certainly you've got banks in other countries where certain types of industries will go and they'll go to that bank, but it's usually one of the big three or one of the big four that just happens to cater more. So look at Australia, for example. ANZ more caters to institutions and governments and big companies, whereas other banks are more focused on retail banking. But you don't have hundreds of different banks and one or two of them that are maybe decent size but relatively random, having this giant proportion of people who are all in the startup field. And the herd mentality that created with Silicon Valley Bank might have been its downfall. And so startups, crypto, how many other spaces, people have a certain herd. When I went to Bangkok for a number of events about a decade ago, I found a certain number of folks who they went to Bangkok because everyone else went to Bangkok. And no doubt that creates an ecosystem and they benefited from sharing startup advice with each other. But at a certain point, it became different levels of people that just all had gone because someone else had done it, rather than saying, well, what should we do? At this point, I'm not commenting on whether Silicon Valley Bank should have succeeded or should have gone down. Obviously, it seems like a lot of things were done wrong. But Silicon Valley, no doubt, is known for having a rather groupthink mentality. It's why it exists. Because I've been telling you for years that you're seeing smaller Silicon Valleys pop up around the world in places that have much lower taxes, that have much more attractive climates, where you can go there and potentially be given citizenship for hiring people, and you can hire people at much lower prices than you would at Silicon Valley. And you can hire the people who can't get visas to come and work in the United States, but they are very talented people. In short, many Silicon Valleys, whether they're in Israel or Armenia or Chile or all sorts of places around the world, may make your life a lot easier. But you're not following the herd if you go there. My entire business career, and we've built Nomad Capitalist into a multi-eight-figure business, has been based around not following the herd and going the other direction. There certainly are some consequences to that sometimes. Being an extreme contrarian, going where other people don't go, can have its own downfalls. But if you're looking at just following what everyone else is doing, you're going to pay higher taxes, you're going to pay more for labor, you're going to have a harder time recruiting talent. You may be cool, but you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. And again, people go to the same digital nomad places. They go to Barcelona. Why not look at other places that may be out there? People take vacations in the same places. People pay taxes. There are people right here on YouTube, on podcasts, on the internet who say, don't worry about taxes. Just pay your taxes and just focus on making more money. And then you see they live in Miami or they live in Las Vegas. And you say to yourself, there's a certain amount of herd mentality there where, again, it's nice to be surrounded by a certain ecosystem, but the average person, you probably don't need to have that many people in your ecosystem. People have built businesses, having a small number of people around them who are right at their level. Even if you move to Miami or Las Vegas or Austin, you're not going to have that many people who are going to be building multi-eight-figure businesses if that's what you want to do. Maybe more than you would somewhere else. But people are moving to those zero-tax states ostensibly to save on taxes. If you're going to move, you might as well move, as I always say. And so if it's more important to follow the herd, you're going to end up paying more and having more restrictions just for doing that. So rather than moving to Austin, consider why not move to Dublin, which has tax advantages for foreigners, which has one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the developed world, which has tons of talent that's come from not only all over Europe, but all over the world. Not exactly a slouch. And even as an American, and even more if you're not an American, you can save a lot of taxes by moving there. Rather than moving to Miami, why not look at Singapore? Again, not a slouch at all, and you can dramatically reduce your taxes over what you'd pay in Miami. And if you don't live in the United States, then you might all consider where the herd is moving where you live. If you're in the digital nomad space, find places that are off the beaten track and go there. Because I think there's a certain amount of complacency in addition to the ecosystem of, hey, let's help each other grow our businesses. There's a certain amount of, hey, here's what works in our ecosystem. I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of education. I got a couple of courses recently on certain business topics that are entirely focused on people who are running their business in the US. And I think people who are selling a course or doing joint ventures or doing any kind of business where their entire myopic focus is the US are missing a huge percentage of opportunities in the world. But if you're living in Austin or Las Vegas or Miami or anywhere else, that's what everyone else is doing. They're focusing on that one country. And certainly you can get very wealthy just selling within the United States. But guess what? It's a lot easier doing business somewhere else. We translated my book into numerous different other languages, and we're starting to see sales of those books. And we're starting to see people calling us and saying, hey, this is very interesting. People from Poland, people from Germany. Hey, I'd never really heard about this before. Now, unfortunately, these people don't always speak perfect English, and so we'll eventually have to build out systems to service people in Polish if we want to take advantage of those opportunities. But we're also translating our website into different languages because it's often easier to be successful in other countries where people may not speak English, but they're not as used to the prevalence of information that you'd find in English or in the United States. And so following the herd in terms of just doing business in English, just doing business in the United States, just moving to places where everyone else is moving, just doing what everyone else is doing, is going to, in my opinion, cost you money in the long run. It's certainly going to cost you money if you're staying somewhere in the United States or any high-tax country, rather than saying, you know what, there are plenty of tax incentives in dozens of countries around the world where I can go and dramatically reduce my tax bill, put more money back into my company, and hey, you know what? Maybe I'll visit the US and go to 4 events a year and meet people there. And I can do that while still dramatically lowering my tax bill. The herd mentality is costing people millions and even tens of millions of dollars in their businesses. I believe you can be just as happy picking a place because, hey, from the tax-friendly list, you've got everything from Dublin and Singapore down to Panama City, down to Grenada, Nicaragua, Tbilisi, Georgia. There's plenty of places at all ends of the spectrum that are going to give you anything that you need. So the idea that only the herd will give you what you need is simply not true. I believe you're seeing that a bank was brought down based on the herd mentality, and yet many of those businesses that are operating in that herd ecosystem are being brought down by missing out on so many other opportunities to keep more of their money and find many other business opportunities outside of their own isolated ecosystem.